What's going on, everyone? Today we need to talk about AI. You probably have already seen it's all over the news. It's all over Wall Street. It's in every earnings call. You see it on the TV for commercials or wherever you consume your media in regards to artificial intelligence being added to smart devices, your cell phones, your computers, and things like that. Well, I don't want to talk about the technical aspects of it. I want to address what I hear the most, which is people like you and me. How is it going to impact our jobs and the livelihoods of those people in this country that work for a living? So we're going to jump into it from that aspect today. Let's get into it. To start, I want to talk about AI in terms of the approach it can be used to modernize work or to change or disrupt work. There's three main aspects of AI that fall into that. The first would really be symbolic AI, which is a rule-based solution. What this basically means is that the AI, if you were going to take it to your job or trying to apply it to where you work, these types of symbolic AIs are going to look at your job that is highly repetitive, highly consistent, and usually will yield the same outcome. As an example to that, if you are always receiving the exact same information and you are doing the exact same work to said information, and then you're sending it to the same people or the same consumers of that information, that would be an ideal application for a symbolic AI. It's looking at something that is highly repetitive, highly consistent, and it can be trained very quick. So that's how a symbolic AI would be applied. The next approach that you would see in AI, which is kind of the next evolution of it, would be machine learning, which we hear a little bit more about in the news because that's where things really start to kind of break free. This basically would build off of a symbolic AI infrastructure, like I just mentioned, but it has the ability to learn without explicit programming. Basically what that means is, like we talked about in Symbolic, you would tell the AI, if you see this, do this, and then this shall follow. If you see anything different than that, stop, ask a human. The machine learning will do those same things, but it has the ability to kind of zoom out and say, hey, I was told to do A, B, and then C. But now I've gotten to a point where all of the componentry is not the same. A decision needs to be made. The machine learning aspect, what it can do, as opposed to going to a human, it can look at all of the work it's done in the past and say, have I ever seen this before? And if I have, is there a predictable output? And if there is, I'm going to learn from that and fill in my own programming gap so that I can continue the work moving forward and keep that automation and keep it out of the humans or out of our workforce's hands. So that's machine learning. So symbolic, highly repetitive, highly consistent, trainable. Machine learning takes that symbolic AI, but it learns from history and trends and kind of programs itself, if you will. The one that sits on top of that would be the deep learning. All of these things kind of layer on top of each other. So when you look at deep learning AI, this is taking the symbolic AI that we talked about and the machine learning, but it's opening it up even further to where it's not only looking at the data that's available within its own system or your own organization, it's able to do deep net learning. It can zoom out, it can look at external resources to build more informed and capable decisions. So essentially what this does is it's taking all of those three different applications, pulling them together so that it can become more sophisticated and more autonomous. Those are the three approaches that you would see for AI solutions: a symbolic AI, machine learning, or deep learning. And again, they are all based on evolution from consistency. High consistency, symbolic. Good degree of consistency, but requires some thought process to go into it, machine learning. If it has a high degree of variability and is dependent on multiple sources outside of your own infrastructure, as an example, that's where the deep learning is going to kind of step in. So now that we talked about the applications of AI, we need to zoom out and talk a little bit more about the broader AI landscape to see how all of these pieces can come together. This gets a little bit more convoluted and complicated, but this is where you hear a lot of the big tech companies spend their time talking, because this is where the future is going to go in regards to disruption. So the first of the three that we want to talk about is called generative AI. This is very kind of straightforward, and I'm going to simplify all this because, again, we don't want to go into the tech side. But the generative AI is really used as a large language model with the intent of creating a specific output. As a very simple example, we've probably all used generative AI at this point because there are a lot of applications for our phones or even web-based services where you will go to a site, you will type in what you want to see or have created, and then it will give you that output. You can say, create an image of this with this background with rain and et cetera, and it'll say, here's my interpretation of what you just said. That would be a generative AI. And again, these are all going to kind of layer in. The next is a traditional AI, which is often integrated with or has tight correlation to machine learning. This is where, like we talked about, prediction models, classification, building blocks. So when we're looking at work or a process that we do, the machine learning and the traditional AI is where we're going to do, like we just talked about. It's going to look at how things normally happen. It's going to repeat the things that it can predict. It's going to try and solve the things that are anomalies. And only then, when all of those things fail, does it zoom out and say, I need support. So that's the traditional AI, or the machine learning, kind of layered into this broader landscape. Where things really start to take off and where all of the conversations for businesses tend to be focused on today, and I shouldn't say for all businesses, this would be more in regards to services, right? We'll talk about creation in a moment, but this would apply more to service-based businesses, the people that are concerned about what happens to my job if AI really takes off and gets off the ground. This would be the agentic AI. The way it was described to me once that really resonated was, think of AI as an org chart. You have your entry-level teams who are doing all the work. You have their supervisors, you have their managers, and then you have the leadership on top of it. Agentic AI is the leadership to all of the subsequent AIs. So when we talked in the beginning about the symbolic AI, that was highly repetitive, highly repeatable work that doesn't require a lot of thought. When it needs help, it goes to machine learning. When machine learning needs help, it goes into deep learning. And then you can start kind of cascading from there. Agentic AI basically exists to manage a whole suite of AI solutions. It can help the symbolic AI problem solve. So as we talked about before, the symbolic AI is going to do things that are highly repetitive, and when it sees an anomaly, it goes to a human. With agentic AI, that symbolic is going to say, hey, I don't know what to do with this. I'm going to go ask the agentic AI solution. And then it can do more research, more capable thought process to help drive a solution to keep the human out of the loop, as is commonly said. That's where the agentic AI really starts to kind of come in. It is looking at all of the technology and all of the automation, all of the machine learning, all of the traditional AI, generative AI, and it is forcing them to work together in ways that they can't do on their own. So they are the leader of the AI org. And then as you cascade down, each of them have lesser capability and more focused area. So that's the first thing that we want to kind of really dive into, is how AI is used as an approach, and then how does it fit in a larger landscape. And we talked about a lot of things there, but that was intended to provide some, hopefully more simplistic clarity on what all of this stuff means, so you can try and apply it to you, your job, and your career. But the big question that we want to address and that we want to talk about today is, what does this mean to you and me? And where are we at in this journey? Right off the bat, without having to make you wait till the end, most organizations are not ready for this. And there's two reasons that I say that. The first reason is, we talked about simplistic AI needing to have highly consistent processes, high repeatability, high predictability. While that may be true, these are all artificial intelligence. They are bound based on what they are taught. If you do not have good training content, and I don't mean decent, it has to be pretty pristine, because the AI usually learns by either watching someone perform their job or by reading SOPs and training content to educate itself on what its expectations are. So one, organizations usually do not operate, and I don't know if this is a surprise at this point in my career, I'm no longer surprised with it, but most companies don't have clean operations or clean processes. And what that means is that any AI, whether it's just traditional automation, it's a simplistic AI, traditional, whatever it might be, they're only as good as the information they are provided. So if you have a difficult process with inconsistent inputs and outputs, AI is going to struggle to provide uplift there because it needs to be trained. And if you give it bad data, it's going to execute bad, which means you're going to have bad output. And then you're going to have customer satisfaction, and that's going to turn into monetary issues. So that's the first reason why I say most companies aren't ready for this. They don't have clean processes. They don't have clean standards. It'll be very difficult to implement any layer of AI if you don't have closer to pristine processes. That's one. Number two, it is incredibly expensive and resource dependent. In fact, we're sitting here now. It is the second week in October when I'm recording this, and news articles all over this morning talking about NVIDIA and the large AI investment companies struggling with energy and power. AI is a massive consumer of electricity. The investment that is going in all over Asia and the US to build AI server farms is almost absurd. Because of the processing and compute power required for AI to do what it does, it is cost prohibited in many ways, especially when you get into these, let's say, non-consumer solutions. I use AI every day. I really do. I can talk about examples and how I do it, but I do depend on a couple of different solutions every day because I do think it has a very good application. We'll talk about that in a minute. But those types of applications are they're not complicated. It's usually me asking questions or sharing information to help get insights. Still requires a lot of computing power. One of the things that I heard in the news, which is absolutely hilarious, but it makes a lot of sense, is people who thank their AI. You ask it a question, then you say thank you. That costs millions and millions of dollars in power consumption and compute power, because to you would hear that and it would bounce off of your mind and you don't have to react. But to an AI, it's going to consume that, try and figure out what the contextual meaning is or if it needs to do anything to generate a response. So you have just said thank you to a machine that's trying to understand what you mean, and then they're going to come back with the response. So it costs millions and millions of dollars just to say thank you to these things. And we use it in a consumer grade. If you now try and apply this to a large organization and you say, I need AI to look at this incredibly complicated string of events. And let's say you provide services and you deal with different information flows coming from multiple sources to try and drive an output. You take all of that compute power and all of that knowledge and you feed that to an AI, and then you train it and you get it to learn, and then you start testing it. That is limiting from a compute and a power consumption perspective. Doesn't mean it's not getting invested in. A lot of companies are going down this route, but I'm sharing it because right now it is not scalable to the magnitude that you may think. And a lot of it is due to resource dependency, compute power, and electrical consumption. So it's going to be a while before this really starts to disrupt. What I would say for the people who want to know, does this impact me? If you work in a field right now where the work you do is highly consistent, highly repeatable, then yes, AI is going to disrupt your world when the organizations start to invest in it. And you'll probably hear them say one of two things. They're either going to invest in it to decrease cost, which would be headcount reduction, or they would word it in such a way that they're going to invest in it so that they can grow without adding headcount. Getting through the corporate jargon, either way, what that means is less people doing more work because you're being supplemented by AI. If your work has multiple inputs, multiple outputs, decision trees, and things that you have to look for to drive a specific outcome, maybe it's a customer specific outcome or it's a product specific outcome, and they all have variabilities depending on how they get executed. AI can still happen there, but it's going to be longer, it's going to be more expensive, and most companies are not going to be ready for that at this time. And then when you start getting into the fields that are all ideation, they're all intellectual, or they're all creative, that gets to be very muddy and very complicated. A lot of the things that come to mind with that, like on the business side, you are not going to see AI start disrupting strategy. You can go to the AI and say, hey, here's my business profile and what we do. Where should we go and invest in the future? And let's start to build those plans. That's going to be all based on information that's coming from external sources, and it's just not going to be leveraged. However, if you work in where we see a lot of applications and a lot of benefit of AI right now, if you work into research or in the sciences or in programming and things like that, or even education, it has a very complementary benefit. Most people get concerned about AI as displacing their work and putting them out of a job. But in some of those other fields, you can actually use this to help expedite your research or your design so that you can step away from some of the more mundane tasks that don't require your skill sets. As an example, and we see this all of the time, you are developing a new piece of front-end software that customers or people are going to touch. There is common code that exists in a lot of these things, but then there's the more sophisticated code that people have to write and create because it takes a skill or an art. Usually you'd have those high-class engineers, those high-profile engineers writing all that kind of stuff, which they could do in their sleep, and it's non-value add. A lot of the AI stuff now, you can come back and just have it put in main block code so that you can focus on the nuance. That's awesome. Doesn't necessarily eliminate jobs, but it allows high caliber talent to focus on the more critical thinking part of their job and not the, all right, I need to wash the dishes kind of stuff. That's really cool. We also see it in healthcare and sciences. You need to go out and get research. You need to pull results. You need to compare current tests to old tests. AI is awesome at doing that kind of stuff because it's working within a finite data set. It's able to go and collect information and bring it back to you. It can apply mathematical applications to what you're looking at, and it can just accelerate what you're doing so that you can get away from some of those less valuable tasks. So it does have cool applications like that it can be used for. But in regards to what's going to happen to your job, my job, and people all over the world who are performing work, right? I think if you're in the manufacturing space, if you're on the line and you're making product, you need to worry more about robotics, right? But again, that's very expensive, it's very limiting, and it has similar applications. The complexity of movements and assembly of good, can a robot do it, yes or no? So if you work in a manufacturing environment, again, at the plant level, AI probably isn't going to be coming your way anytime soon. Your supervisors and managers, they could have a little bit more of an impact looking at things like quality and stuff like that. If you're working in retail, again, AI is not coming your way, specifically on the customer-facing side of it. Working in the warehouses and doing things like that, potentially. But if you are working at a storefront or something like that, yeah, it's not going to come for you anytime soon. When you start getting into services, when you start getting into desk jobs, when you start getting into call centers or service centers. That's where the applications have the most capability. But again, you need to meet those requirements. You need to have a strong, documented, and controllable process. And your company needs to be willing to invest a pretty good amount of capital and continued expense to take advantage of these things. So AI is out there and it is coming. The way you hear about it in the news makes it sound like it's coming tomorrow and it's going to be absolutely disruptive today. And it's just not, it's not where it's at. There are companies that are further along, but some of the best companies who have invested in this and have put a lot of talented people into it, there's things that they're finding that are slowing down the progress. And it's normal when you're trying to trailblaze that you're going to run into these things. But when the AI can look at stuff, usually they apply it to parts of their business. If you apply an AI solution or an AI model to a part of your business, what happens to the upstream and downstream parts of that organization? Does this become a bottleneck? Does it become so efficient that now these other two become problems? In actuality, what happens is they fix one aspect or they focus the AI into one portion of their business. And while it drives improvement there, it often breaks or creates gaps upstream and downstream. And that's because it's not a holistic approach. People want to apply AI to the problem areas in their business when in reality, they should be trying to look at an end-to-end flow to make sure that when we apply this, the preceding inputs and the post outputs are not negatively impacted and we are not creating constraint upstream or downstream. All of that being said, AI is coming. It is being applied to organizations right now. It is having benefits and it is having them within an order of magnitude based on the complexities and all the things that we just talked about. The things that you need to know is that one, it's not going to be here tomorrow and there's no impending doom. And two, and I think this one's important, AI is intended to increase productivity, quality of outcome, or allow an organization to scale with their current headcount, or in some cases, to decrease headcount so that they can maximize margins. Because of that, there are talks right now in the US and in the EU about the potential need for regulating AI applications. And the reasoning behind that makes a lot of sense, and I completely support it. Where you work and where I work, where everybody works for the most part, is to provide a good or a service to another person. It could be a collective of people as an organization or whatever, but it's going to someone. If AI gets applied at scale and everyone goes down that path, the unemployment and economic impacts would be catastrophic. If there is no one to consume products because they're all unemployed, it doesn't matter if your AI is any good or not. No one's going to buy it. Your organization is going to struggle. And the common argument is, well, it's going to require different jobs. Yes, AI will require different jobs. But the jobs that those are going to require at this current state are highly skilled technical positions. You could argue some of it would come into the training or the writing aspects of it, but the people that are going to be needed are the people that are going to be either training the AI, developing the AI, deploying the AI, creating standards, creating trainings, and doing that kind of stuff. So no matter how you look at it, the workforce dependency would get smaller. Different jobs would be created, but the entry-level jobs, I would say the entry-level jobs to the supervisor, mid-management level jobs, those are the ones that have the most opportunity to be disrupted. And once they're disrupted, I mean, that's it. That would have economic impact. So that's why countries are looking at regulating this to avoid that type of economic collapse. The things that they've talked about right now, and now we're getting into theory and a little bit of prediction. But right now they're talking about either limiting the types of applications that you can have to protect the worker, or they're talking about applying percentages. As an example, no more than X% of a workforce can be displaced because of an AI. Something along those lines, so that they can do it, they can benefit, but they can't get rid of every employee they have because they now have an AI, right? Because if every company does that, that turns into economic downfall. For everything we just talked about, that's why we needed to discuss the AI. It is all over. I get so many questions, and there's so many people concerned about what does this mean for them in their future. And I'm hoping that this provided a little bit of clarity or guidance into where we are in this journey, what it means for you, and it's given you some information to figure out if these applications are even relevant to the field or the industry that you serve. If you have questions or comments, let me know. But until next time, later.